Hello, Shaggy Dog audience. I am the Shaggy Dog Philosopher. Wow, my beard is messy. And you have clicked into the Chew Toys. Yeah, Shaggy Dog Chew Toys with the Shaggy Dog Philosopher, where I'm going to hate read for you something that I hate. We're picking up at episode 5. So we're just going to actually, we are just going to jump right into, we are going to jump right into Jane today. Um, Man, I really wish I had access to my. I really wish I had access to my settings. I don't like that this is mirrored. First of all, I can't fiddle with myself without looking like an idiot because it's mirrored on me, but also it looks like I'm talking to you out of the left side of my face, and I don't like that. I don't like that it mirrors me so that it looks like I'm lying to you iconographically, and like I can only lie to you iconographically. I also wish that I were smart enough to get that so that, yeah, that's what's going to always happen. I wish I were smart enough that I had anchored that in such a way that it won't smack me in the face. Okay, so what's actually happening here, if this is your first time hanging out with me and you just clicked in and you're like, who is this guy? What's going on with him? I have a different kind of stress response than you do. When I hate things, I just don't do them. And so, what this is about is me fighting through the adversity of hating this book so very much. But I want to read every single word of this book. I don't want to read 0 words of this book, and I don't want to. I don't want to cheat myself of the opportunity to have overcome the adversity of this book. So what I should do is tell my friends and acquaintances that I'm in here. Something that you're gonna get used to with me is dead space. We're gonna just kind of chill and relax a little bit. I don't like at the beginning of big YouTubers' videos when they don't edit out the silence as they let their friends and family and general audience catch up to them, and I'm not doing that right now, but we are going to just take a moment and sit in the negative feeling that I have about reading this book and wonder why my cat is screaming and why that bitch is just not going to do anything about it. Okay. For those of you watching in real time, or for those of you who are detectives, it's been it's been 4 days. I read 4 days in a row, and then I took 4 days off, and if I take any longer, I'm disinclined to ever return. So, what I'm not going to do is give you a bunch of meta text like I have in episodes previous. I am not going to read any other books. In other words, I'm just going to pick up where I left off. And where I left off was at Thursday morning, February 3rd, in 1977. The day after our previous chapter. Jane Roberts tells us directly, the following material came to me just as I lay down to take a nap Wednesday afternoon. I scribbled it down at once and typed it Thursday morning. I would also consider, William James Ghost tells us, certain acts of valor and daring as creative in the highest sense, in that during such moments man transcends, first of all, imaginatively, ideas of basic limitations and goes beyond his usual experience of reality. I can't remember exactly where William James came down on the warrior ethos of the early 1900s, but this doesn't sound like pragmatism. Pragmatism is deciding for yourself what you're going to do given the cultural options available to you, and this warrior sounds like a warrior ethos that she's trying to incorporate because there's a huge of the neo-pagan and spiritual but not religious crowd who want a warrior cult back then. One of the first things that happen, and you know you're on your way to making a cult, is you get soldiers or people who are interested in paramilitary and militia that join your cult and want to turn it into a paramilitary secret government. In so doing, William James Ghost continues, he actually, for that moment, creates that superior world with its observable conditions. And this superior world nonsense is higher thought bullshit. And higher thought is going to is going to be difficult for me to bring to your attention in a systematic way without doing a systematic. I'm trying to think of a YouTuber who does this stuff. There are a bunch of them, but without doing a systematic, this is higher thought. These are the people. These are the core tenets, and then out from there, the sort of Cthulhu tentacles out from there. That's its own thing, and that in its own right is probably 100 hours. Like in its own right, if we were to do it, if we were to correct, it would be multiple books, probably 10 of them, if we did it right. And I've tracked it down, and I've got the books in order for the most part. That's how I got to Jane Roberts and Andrea Perrin. Actually, as I was chasing how higher thought played out circa 2016. I'll tell you that later. William James continues to say, I am referring to events where, in crisis situations, the body performs in ways that, momentarily at least, contradict known individual or mass beliefs about its limits and possible achievements. When it outdoes itself and hence through its performance breaks old records that were earlier held up as representing the ultimate possible and bodily achievement. And what she's doing here is what I'm telling you. She's making the broad neo pagan New Age argument that there's something to Viking magic, the Berserker, that there was something to that, that it's harnessable, it's tappable, it's trainable, and that there are classes of people that can be professionals to get you to that state. And so, what William James is doing is telling you that Jane Roberts is one of them. Such acts, he continues, take place first in the imagination in bursts of corporeal insight that can strike with the same force as any revelation. And under that sudden impetus of mind, the body miraculously responds and brings to the physical arena a new idea of what is practical or possible. And here there's some mental magic. She's back to doing the power of positive thinking. But this stuff is in sports. This stuff has gone nowhere. People genuinely believe this stuff. It's There's something to it though. There's something to mental reps, right? So like part of what I've been doing this last 4 days, why it's taken me time to get back here, is I've been doing mental reps. I've been just running myself through series after series after series after series after series, lots and lots and lots, uncountable, probably thousands or millions of scenarios I've put myself in with what other books could I read? What would continuing to read this look like? What would going through and just highlighting it for myself and reading choice passages that I can argue will look like? What are the different iterations of what I'm doing that I could do to do this differently to find more success? And the feedback that I've gotten is that I need to change absolutely nothing. In fact, messing with the pattern in the way that I have today by choosing just to go 2 hours straight Jane instead of breaking it up in half or even into a smaller chunk than that is a change. And it's the change that I've come down kind of like the in Endgame and Infinity War when Doctor Strange says he's run all these simulations, right? He's run all these simulations and this is the only way it can come out right. I kind of did one of those for myself. William James continues, it is the tension between the search for fulfillment or perfection and the actual performance possible in the physical world that promotes creative acts as they are understood. And so this is broadly what people say about about athletes. So this is the point of Olympic sport and doing it at the Olympic level, and the reason that people say like that the MLB baseball is facetious for saying that it's a world champion, the World Series, or that the NFL has the world champions. Well, you're the only 32 teams in one country able to compete. Yeah, of course you're the world champions, but it's not a world competition. So the idea here um, is to find that tension between the search for fulfillment or perfection and the actual performance possible in the physical world that promotes creative acts as they're understood. So what she's talking about is Christy Yamaguchi, right? And there's something to that. I don't know that the way it's being written here is relevant. I don't think it's good. For true creativity always destroys limitations and increases the mental, spiritual, psychic, or physical areas of expression open to man. I wish instead of using these vague and kind of smart sounding sentences. Now, I understand that this is what I do in my writing. And so what I'm about to say is, well, I wish more people were like me, but I keep telling you could approach being more like me. But I wish that more philosophers, I wish more public speakers in general were more interested in actually listening to the advice that was handed down to us by the person that everybody says is the best philosopher, Aristotle. He says, if you can't say it succinctly in one sentence, you can't say it. So if you have to go on and 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 on, like I often do, like this is, in order to say what you're saying, you don't know what you're saying. Now, that's not a negative critique to me, especially if you watch my old work. I don't know what I was saying. I didn't know what I was saying, and I still don't know what I was saying. I knew what I was reaching for, but I couldn't repeat how I said it. But there's also something to say. There's something to be said about the criticism of repeating yourself so many times. You know what you're saying so well, you never deviate from it. And she might even tell us that. For true creativity, William James continues, always destroys limitations and increases the mental, spiritual, psychic, or physical areas of expression open to man. They stay vague like this because they think that makes them true at every level of abstraction. But what it doesn't do is that if it were true at every level of abstraction, it wouldn't be vague. It would be specific, and you would be able to plug it in quickly and easily and calculate it no matter what your level of intellect is at every level of abstraction in every circumstance that it could possibly be relevant, and it would remain right, true, and useful. That's called aletheia. I want to be very clear for anybody who hasn't watched the first five. This work is absolute bullshit. What didn't happen is that William James Ghost wrote this for her. Continuing, the Greek conception of the fit mind and the fit body is important in this context, yet that ideal finally disintegrated into a futile search for a dreary, stereotyped mental and physical perfection whose mottled edges blurred the vitality of any individual variances. I see, however, how these principles can, in an altered fashion, be applied to a modern democratic society while retaining their original insistence upon high aspiration and individual fulfillment. And what she said is the Greek conception of the fit mind and the fit body is important in this context. So we're going to spend another paragraph not telling you what it is, and then we're going to end the chapter so I don't have to elaborate that because I don't actually know what it means. And what I don't want to do is talk about what it means and be wrong. Because if I say something that has 2,500 years of context that's well understood, but I don't understand it, I instantly out myself as not knowing what the fuck I'm doing, and I instantly out you as a sucker for buying my work. So what the Greek conception of the fit mind and the fit body is nothing. There was no conception of a fit mind in the Greek worldview. What they believed is that if you were beautiful and had a beautiful body, that was close to godliness, so you maintained your body. The fit mind horse shit didn't come around until skeptics and stoics in Rome. So she's just wrong, and she has to be vague, and she has to immediately pivot literally off of a semicolon so that she doesn't announce herself. So if you want to go and see how she actually tried to articulate that, she says that idea of the fit mind and the fit body disintegrated into a futile search for a dreary stereotyped mental and physical perfection. When did that happen, William? Now, see, what we do know about William James is that William James cites his arguments with dates and the people who actually said the thing. So when did that happen, William James? Why did you just leave her body and end the chapter? It's almost like everything she's saying that's happening to her isn't fucking happening. And she's cheating. And she's using your ignorance to take advantage of you and say things that you think make you sound smart. And so everybody loses. Everybody loses. The publisher loses. She loses for participating in this because she believes it. And you lose it for just participating, for just being here. You lose out. And by that, I mean reading her book without me. Being here with me, you win because you get to see me lose my mind every few paragraphs. This antler is pissing me off. So there's a chapter break, and then Jane tells us, I typed this material, then got up, heated water for instant coffee, and washed the dishes while I waited. Here's the thing, the instant coffee thing bothers me. It shouldn't, but the instant coffee thing bothers me. I'm not I'm not thinking about why. I'm rapidly evaluating whether it should be. Writers have this reputation that precedes them of being people not necessarily of wealth, but of taste, people of class, people of discernment. And so writers have a real bad reputation, and that's men and women, of being hipsters. As long as there have been writers allowed to go by their name, there's been a reputation of writers as hipsters. And she's drinking instant coffee? Now, I know I'm a person of my time and that the fancy coffees are only about a decade old, but all of her character details just trigger me that this woman is not who she says she is. As I stood at the sink doing these chores, she continues, suddenly a whole burst of James material came into my mind in a circular fashion difficult to describe, so I rushed back to the typewriter to record the following. We're going to say right now that that circular thing is what happens when you're trying to hold on to a complex idea, and so you need to give yourself post-it note tagged mnemonics to know where you're headed forward out of it. And so what you do is, if you're not a skilled writer and you're not a skilled storyteller, so you're not good at memorizing your poetry and your short form uh, creation, you're not good at having visual you're not excuse me you're not used to having visual imaginative experiences, which means you're not used to telling the story back to yourself. This is what it's like. You have to write it down exactly the way you said it in your mind when you went into the liminal state between doing dishes and thinking actively about scamming people that you're William James. It has to be like what we're about to read. This one's longer. In some dreams, Williams says, inspirations and revelations in the performance of artistic pursuits and some athletic achievements as well, man then displays abilities that are record breaking, that set new standards and destroy past limitations either of mind and body, and therefore bring into conscious awareness new areas of action, contemplation, and creativity. False. That's just false. What she just said is the more people are aware of things that other people are done, the better we get at them. But she didn't say it that way. She tried to make it sound big, like a big deal, which means that uh, when she's writing this, 76, the Olympics are either happening or have just happened. Dreams or flashes of telepathic insight can also momentarily destroy the usual barriers that separate one mind from another and make mockery of science's concepts concerning space, time, and the nature of the species. Now, I don't remember if it was in this book or even if it was in this particular microphone, but I was reading something recently to someone that was talking about sports and athletes and what they thought about sports medicine in the 1970s, and she could not be more wrong about sports medicine right now. Such incidents suggest the immortal existence of a portion of man's consciousness by displaying those characteristics and abilities that show this knowledge. Such incidents as what? Oh, dreams or flashes of telepathic insight suggest the immortal existence of at least some portion of man's consciousness by displaying those characteristics and abilities that show his knowledge not to be bound by the laws that before had seemed to restrict him. Well, they don't show that. They don't display that because they haven't been displayed to be real. They still haven't been demonstrated 50 years after she wrote this, yeah, to be real. I prefer to list all such activities, paranormal or not, under the heading of light creative acts, for each one is creative in that it opens new areas of action or thought and expands man's capacity to think or behave in new fashions. And what she's saying here is she is being outright cagey. And what she's saying is, even if in the future it's proved that there's no such thing as telepathy, I call it light creativity because conning someone is creative. Beginning In my time and continuing in yours, however, certain misconceptions on the part of psychology have grossly diminished man's opportunities for expression and creativity by handing down average standards that supposedly govern individual behavior, beyond which the normal person is not to venture. Hence, in my time, the birth of parapsychology came as a new artificial division to include activities not of a normal nature, a container for all of those experiences that did not fit into the original cramped tenets adopted as the sum of man's psychological reality. That can't be true. Psychology wasn't a school when in his lifetime. It absolutely could not have been. Parapsychology, psychology wasn't a school. It absolutely couldn't have had sub schools. Parapsychology couldn't have been a sub school of a school that didn't exist. Freud's European background, and here she's trying to mix Freud and William James together and make them contemporaries, but they just weren't. Freud was too young. Freud's European background and America's experiment with democracy were each partially responsible for these misconceptions and their unfortunate results. In a democracy without a rigid authoritative government. What? Freud's European background and America's experiment with democracy. Okay, so before we even move any further from that, the experiment with democracy bullshit is fully 1970s horseshit. William James wouldn't have said that because the experiment thing is this idea that experiments can fail and that you have to do a different experiment when experiments fail. But that's not how that works. When we shot Voyager 2 out into space on an infinite mission of information gathering, that's one experiment. And you know how long it's going to last? Infinitely. It's never coming home. And so long as we can get information from it, so long as we can get data from it, and we have spit out receivers that will not catch up with it, but catch up with its signal, so we can continue getting signals from it indefinitely. Experiments, when they don't fail, experiments don't fail. And if you get results you weren't expecting from your experiment, you don't just do a different experiment to try to get the results you wanted. That's not how experiments work, people. That's just not how experiments work. So what he's about to say about what she's about to say about some bullshit that's inherent in the democratic process, she's just wrong. She's just wrong, and she's saying 1970s anarchy bullshit. She's just uneducated and doesn't know what the fuck she's talking about, and she's talking to a huge group of people because what she thinks she's doing is she thinks that she's being a Unitarian. So we're going to read that again. Freud's European background and America's experiment with democracy were each partially responsible for these misconceptions and their unfortunate results. How? How? Why was Freud's being European? Freud was more Jewish than European. What is she talking about? He wasn't allowed to be European. He was Jewish. I don't understand what she means by that. Hence, in my time in the previous paragraph, this is that she writes such long sentences on purpose. And then when you read them out loud, you read them back to back, and she uses these pronouns like it and that thing. And um, these misconceptions. What misconceptions? What's a misconception? So, hence, in my time, the birth of parapsychology came as a new artificial division. It couldn't have been an artificial division, and it couldn't have been new in your time. But it came to include activities not of a normal nature. What are you talking about? Parapsychology can't be events of a normal nature. The para means unnormal. It literally means above. The para there is above natural, which means supernatural, which paranormal just means above the normal, extra normal. It's the same word. What do you mean? It came to include activities not of a normal nature. That's the only thing it can be. It can't have come to include. If you're making a sub school for parapsychology, it can only be investigating things of a paranormal nature. That's why it's called parapsychology. a container for all of those experiences that do not fit into the original cramped tenets adopted as the sum of man's psychological reality. So, how is that a misconception? What is she talking about? Someone explain this to me. How is it a misconception that parapsychology is for the paranormal? Is the psychology of the paranormal experience? How is that a misconception? And why is it Freud's fault? Freud wasn't doing parapsychology. Jung was doing parapsychology. Freud wasn't doing ghosts and archetypes and all that horse shit. Freud was obsessed with sexuality. What is he talking about? He doesn't know what he's talking about. He's commenting on the work of somebody who didn't get going until after he died. And that we know Jane Roberts hasn't read Freud. We know she hasn't read Freud worth a damn. We know she hasn't read his biography. We know she hasn't attended a single class of somebody teaching his work. She hasn't gone to a single psychoanalytic counselor. We know this. We know about her that she was traumatized by counseling. We know this. So why is she going through and talking at all about parapsychology? Why? Because parapsychology is going to say that what's happening to her isn't happening? Probably. In a democracy without a rigid authoritative government, that is a clause with a semicolon. A semicolon is a half period. You use a semicolon because the words before that, the clause before it, is a complete sentence, and the clause to come after it is a complete sentence. But they're one thing. It's a hard comma. It's like you don't have to say and so much, so you throw in a semicolon. But this is not a complete sentence. William James / Jane Roberts / Rob, her husband, who's actually composing this. In a democracy without a rigid authoritative government, that is two prepositional clauses. Why does it have a semicolon? That upsets me. In a political structure in which the individual is given greater free play, inner authoritative measures are taken to protect the society against what it considers the very dangers of individual action that its constitution says it wants to promote. It's because she's a bad writer and a stupid person. That's the reason. This is how that sentence should read. In a democracy without a rigid authoritative government, in a political structure in which the individual is no longer is given greater free play, inner authoritative measures are taken to protect the society against what it considers the very dangers of individual action that its constitution says it wants to promote. That should be one sentence, but she thinks you're too fucking stupid not to get confused by the commas because she's too fucking stupid to just go back and edit it into a cromulent sentence. So what the fuck did I just read? In a political structure in which the individual is given greater free play, inner authoritative measures, inner relative to whom? The political structure or the person? Are taken to protect the society against what it considers the very dangers. Now, the very there, she even gets the word very wrong. Very in 1978 still means true. It doesn't mean a lot back then. It's not an emphasis word back then. So what she just said is the true dangers. But what she means is the very real danger. Dumb. Dumb, dumb. So what she's saying is that constitutions are necessary because they protect the individual from stupid choices made out of extreme individualism. And then she's saying that parapsychology goes to support as a pillar the the idea that individual liberties and extreme individualism is a bad idea and that constitutions prevent you from having individual liberties, which is that just runs contrary to fact. Psychology was initiated when the new society was trying its wings. What new society? And its father, Freud, with his authoritative heritage. Freud is not the father of psychology. William James is the father of psychology. Is William James Ghost being humble for some reason and attaching his school of philosophy to somebody who didn't even practice his school of philosophy? Freud was a clinical psychologist. If he was a psychologist in his own mind, he was a psychoanalyst because he didn't call himself a psychologist. Freud, with his authoritative heritage, and what she's saying here is with his being a Jew, symbolized for America its own position. Why is America so interested in Freud in William James's Ghost's mind? In the 70s, everyone hated Freud. Now, I understand that Jane Roberts wants to go through and tell us why we should hate Freud in 1976, but everyone already did because of the whole Oedipus, fuck your dad and your mom thing. It must maintain clear conscious lines of action while trying to give vent to all the unconscious, primitive, in scare quotes, drives in such a way that they were released. And here in 1976, she's actually kind of doing the right thing and pushing back on primitivism, but not allowed to damage normal life. The individual must be taught that his deepest drives were suspect so that self-discipline could replace authoritative government. No, 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 that's not what happened. The individual must be taught that his deepest drives were suspect so that the self-discipline could replace authoritative governments. Not what happened. That Nope. Look at the natural outpouring of what happened with this book. Your whole woke, liberal, progressive movement that's happening right now, that elected Biden right now, that did the cancel culture right now, that's on Twitter right now, trying to get you and me banned right now, is an outgrowth of what she just said right there. The individual must be taught that his deep drives were suspect. Every white man is wrong and evil. Your deepest drives must be suspect. Your skin is white. So that self-discipline could replace authoritative government. Because you run the government, you have to be self-disciplined. These are all things that the woke movement has been saying in public for a decade. When I tell you that this book set the foundation for every single evil fucking thing that's happened in the last 20 years, I'm not joking. People believe this shit. Certain feelings, actions, and attitudes were considered normal and others not. What is the liberal left literally saying right now as their own criticism of conservatives? You're weird. You're non normative. And what did she just say? Certain feelings, actions, and attitudes are considered normal. The individual was given a book of rules to follow from birth to the grave, in which the unconscious replaced both the devil and harsh government, forcing obedience through fear of the natural self. She's talking about the Bible, and that just never happened. The individual was never given the Bible until the 70s when those motherfuckers went around putting Bibles in all the hotels. And even then, not every motherfucker is given a Bible. When you go to church, they don't just hand every motherfucker that walks in the door a Bible. When you get born in a hospital, what they don't do is put a fucking Bible on your baby. This is just insane nonsense. Everyone that I speak to goes, the Bible. What's the Bible? Nobody's read the fucking Bible anymore. 1976, people were picking up Jane Roberts and reading Jane Roberts instead of the Bible. Such standardization was then promptly applied to the democracies. Oh my God, she pluralized that wrong. That's democracy apostrophe Y. She went possessive democracies here. She made such a fundamental mistake. The democracies what? Such standardization was then promptly applied to the democracies what? It's unlike. How do you own an unlike? Unhomogeneous citizens. The Italians, English, Irish, Spanish, Dutch, EM dash. Men and women of all racial heritages, EM dash. were therefore expected to follow individual norms that would allow the person a political and social freedom that he would be psychologically unable to misuse. And notice that she's deliberately talking about the whites that nobody liked. And then she points, she's racist as fuck. Her friends, her magic is not for black people in 1976. Don't get it twisted. This is decidedly not for black people. She's not talking to you. She's talking to people that she assumes are going to be of Italian, English, Irish, Spanish, and Dutch heritage. People that are white. And you know what? At that time, they didn't even call Italians white. And Irish weren't allowed to be white either. Um, Actually, none of those that was English was allowed to be white. But the point is, she's racist as fuck. These people were therefore expected to follow individual norms that would allow the person a political and social freedom that he would be psychologically unable to misuse. And that doesn't even make sense. A political and social freedom that he would be psychologically unable to misuse doesn't make sense. In 1976, the bank was still allowed to deny Jewish people from getting loans for houses. It was still allowed to deny black people from getting loans for houses. It was still allowed to deny gay and lesbian couples from getting loans for houses. What the fuck is she talking about? And this hodgepodge inner restraints would serve to replace a paternal government. Inner restraints would serve to replace a paternal government. What the fuck are you talking about? 1776 replaced a paternal government. We don't have a fucking hereditary monarch, Jane. Adventuresomeness, creativity, and energy would all be directed toward the collective goals of society, toward physical triumph over the land and industrial achievement. But that's not true. You don't even need Jordan Peterson to know that corporations have absolutely no interest in creative answers to real problems. All that was an attempt to use and yet curb the fantastic energy of a people who came from every conceivable background and national heritage, and that's to curb the energy. There was never an effort to curb the energy. There was an effort to make huge profits off the enthusiasm of the American dream while withholding the American dream from 98% of the population. What the fuck is she talking about? If you're going to be melancholy and you're going to be pessimistic and you're going to call my country a shithole, Jane, be right about why it's a shithole. Don't just make shit up. What the fuck? The inner life of the American individual became standardized. That happened. However, stripped of religion's old rich symbolisms, that didn't happen. Religion didn't have old rich symbolisms. Not that were available to the public, and not that the public was really allowed to meaningfully engage in. She's talking about being mad at postmodernism because she's broadly a meta modern when metamodern was still fashionable, cool, and new. And so what she's saying is that the move from maybe these big fancy public buildings that had really pretty stained glass windows and maybe speak to the meta myth, that maybe spoke to the meta myth of the human experience, maybe replacing those with ugly churches and courthouses and libraries and museums and McDonald's, maybe all of that was a bad idea. But she's in 1976. William James didn't give a fuck about any of that. He wouldn't be writing it. William James hated postmodernism. He doesn't need to look back on the 70s, back on what, 71 from 1976 from his fucking grave to criticize postmodernism. He criticized the fuck out of postmodern. He buries postmodernism dead in 1906 with pragmatism in the meaning of truth. He says that postmodernism doesn't even have an approach to truth. It doesn't even try to approach truth. It just tries to bury and replace churches with ugly, worse buildings. So he wouldn't say any of this, is my point. He wouldn't say the inner life of the American individual became standardized, stripped of religion's old, rich symbolisms, because the religion of America didn't have old, rich symbolism. In 1910, let's just say 1910, postmodernism began in 1901. No, it didn't. It became a real thing in 1950. William James gave it the name. Modernism became a thing in 1901. How? the fuck, how the fuck does America have old, rich religious symbolism in a faith in 1901 that's minimum 1901 years old? It's actually 1871 years old. Let's just do the math. How does America have old, rich religious symbolism in churches that can't be 400 years old? How does the math check out, Jane? She's writing to a European audience that's not reading, because what Kerm would tell me to say is she's cribbing directly from Madame Blavatsky, because she's forgotten that William James didn't write for an American audience. So when she sat down to do this, she forgot, oh, fuck, yeah, William James didn't write for Americans. He wrote for Europeans, because when he was writing, America was a backwater because World War II hadn't fucking happened yet. We don't have old, rich religious systems in the United States. The United States, for 200 years, by the time William James died, America had already been through 100 years of religious churn. He would never say this. Given no new ones, that's the thing. Given no new rich religious symbolisms. Not true. I just told you, for 200 years, for 100 years up to his point, 200 years to the time of this writing, America had been churning out new religions like crazy. What? William James is just going to pretend like Mormonism didn't happen? What? Jane Roberts is just going to pretend like Scientology didn't happen? That's fucking dumb. They're just going to act like in both of their lifetimes, Aleister Crowley wasn't around setting up the OTO worldwide? That's fucking dumb. Not only is it fucking dumb, it's fucking stupid. It's fucking stupid of you, frankly, to believe her. Freud translated religion's demons into the instinctive impulses. No, he didn't. Retaining these while throwing aside the grander symbols of a heroic and authoritative God. The reason she's burying Freud like this is because Jung stole everything that everybody likes about Jung from Freud. So she can't bury Jung because Jung founded her religion, effectively. He did what she's doing first, effectively. Jung sold bullshit to poor people for the first time because poor people had money for the first time during his lifetime. So she's grifting off of Jung's grifters. So what she can't do is say that Jung is full of shit out of William James' mouth, because what William James would do is go, yeah, the one person who's 100% full of shit is Carl Jung. So what she has to do is have him bury Freud, because everybody hated Freud back then, because everybody who was anybody was cribbing Carl Jung, because that's where the money was. And I'm telling you right now, that's still where the money's at. If you really want to make money stealing parapsychology, which is actually called pop psychology, which is actually properly known as pseudopsychology, if you really want to make money, steal from Jung. Just say the things that Jung was attributed to have said. Don't even actually quote him. Quote his apocryphal shit that he didn't say, and just watch the dollars roll in. I watch these YouTubes. I watch the fucking Twitter guys. I see the follows. They just go up and 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 up. All you have to do is pretend you like Jung. You don't even have to like Jung. You don't even have to be genuine about it. It was Jung who made everything demons. It was Jung. Freud died before the UFO thing happened. The UFO thing happened as Jung was dying, and in his best effort to get every single dollar he could get out of that lemon, he said the ET experience, all of it was just the demonic archetype. It was just his thing doing exactly what he'd been saying it had been doing the whole time. And you know what he did? He made a bunch of money. He got to do a bunch of talks and bullshit at UFO conventions. He made a fuckload of money off of it. And why did he want to make a fuckload of money as he was dying at the end of his life? Because why not? You get so used to it. Why the fuck not? And maybe it will come with you. Who knows? He certainly didn't know. He didn't know dick about shit. Precisely, continues William James, because of his own experience, Freud didn't have experiences. Freud wasn't a deeply experiential guy. Freud was a deeply confused guy who didn't understand why women were so fucking horny. He thought that women were supposed to be not horny because he was Jewish, and he believed what he was taught about Christians, and then he started to engage with Christian women and went, holy shit, Christian women are the horniest thing in the whole fucking universe. What the fuck is going on here? And he set about trying to figure it out. Freud then, continues William James, sometimes felt unendurable upswings of intuition and telepathic data. No, he didn't. But you know who did? You know who wrote a whole book about it? Carl Jung. Surges of creativity, she says, in the deepest undisciplined emotional conditions. No, he didn't. Freud didn't. But Jung did. These only intensified his certainty that the inner life of a man was dangerous and that he was doomed by his own early heritage. Freud perceived and experienced the creative force as primarily sexual in nature. I don't know about the creative force, but he definitely thought that all psychological, all psychopathy, to use the term of their day, we call it psychopathology today, but he believed that all psychopathy was sexual in nature. In a broader way uh, than usually supposed. Okay, well, that's a stupid sentence. I'm going to read that whole thing just to ridicule it. What a stupid thing to interject. Okay, since Kerm has put this in my head, I've noticed it that a lot of people, a lot more people than I gave credit for, will say things like blue is blue because it's blue, it's blue. Fuck you. Yeah, it's blue. Freud perceived and experienced the creative force as primarily sexual in nature in a broader way than usually supposed. Is it unusually supposed that the creative force, the progenitive force, the force that creates more life is sexual? Fuck you, Jane. Fuck you. But also in a Germanic sense of the word. Oh, here we go. She's trying to remember that William James spoke a lot of German. A sexuality that was deeply and darkly passionate, with overtones of surrender or triumph, and with further implications of conflict and warfare. And shut the fuck up with your Nazi bullshit. That is not German sexuality before Hitler and before Nietzsche's sister wanted to get famous for being fucked by every evil person in the world. His psychology, William continues, standardized and explained the feelings of men, that is Freud, and a way that left them no individual interpretations of their own that mattered. This isn't true. He wrote a whole book interpreting dreams for you to interpret your own dreams so you'd stop asking him to finger bang you. Psychoanalysis could come up with individual personal episodes of the most intimate nature, but these were in response to an explanation already given in which individual feelings existed on a standardized basis. And here I'm telling you, if she's into a psychoanalyst, it was a psychoanalyst who hurt her brain, and now she has to tell us through William James' voice why psychoanalysis was bad, even though she has spent at least one chapter before this explaining to hypnosis is good. And you know what hypnosis comes from? Get real close to me. Come here. Come here. I'm going to get away from my mic and I'm going to shout in your fucking ear. Hypnosis comes from psychoanalysis, you dumb bitch. Again, creative acts are non standard.